Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 10. 10. Bloody hell, we've made it.
We've done it.
We've done it. Double digits.
Lovely.
Over after this.
Yeah, no.
That's it now. Get to 10. Sack it off.
Move to Skeggy.
Finally move to Skegness. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, Scream 6. Something that we have been quite excited about for the last week, I think, to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it lends itself to quite a broad discussion, not only about the film, but the Scream franchise, the slasher film, and the career and themes of Wes Craven himself.
Nice.
So, lots of things that we really wanted to talk about.
Definitely.
The release of this film was the perfect opportunity to do so.
Yeah, we haven't done any horrors. This is the first horror.
I mean, Ennie's Men.
Ennie's Men was yeah.
I guess this is the more overt horror film. So probably the first one, really, in that regard.
Firmly in that genre, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not art house, is it?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a critical sense at all, but yeah, I think it's fair to say our first proper horror film, really.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool. Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void.
Okay, then. So, format of the topic will go as follows.
Yes.
Craven.
Yep.
Discuss Craven.
Cravendale, the milk.
Cravendale, the milk.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yeah.
Wes Craven. And then we'll talk a little bit about the slasher.
Yeah.
And then Scream.
Yeah.
As a franchise. Because for various reasons it's really fascinating.
It is, yeah.
The very nature of its existence and the way that the key themes and ideas of the films have grown over the last 2 decades, or I think it's 26 years.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah, 26
one.
years.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really fascinating discussion itself, I hope. And then, of course, Scream 6 itself.
Yeah.
Which we have both went separately. We've done, done a few of those, haven't we? Little separate film.
Lone cinema trip, yeah.
I longed for you, really.
Yeah, no, the whole time I was...
couldn't enjoy the film. I was sort of just...
I was just crying.
Yeah, just sat there sort of...
just was sobbing. The people next to me got up and left.
Yeah,
and then they complained, and anyway.
I asked the guy next to me to put his hand in my popcorn, but he wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would have.
Yep. 100%.
Even though you know what was going to happen.
I mean, that's why.
Yeah. Third degree burns. Right, okay, so, Craven.
Yeah.
A pretty seismic figure in the horror genre. And I think he... in his case, certainly, alongside people like Tobe Hooper and Dario Argento,
Sam Raimi,
is someone that is special in the genre because I think he gave horror films a sense of thematic or maybe academic weight.
Yeah, definitely.
That could be sort of feasted upon, or in a way that was, I guess that sort of in itself encourages a deeper connection to his films.
Yeah, I think so. I think, obviously, especially around there. It was sort of the 70s where he became prolific, and the horror genre was typically around then not really seen as something to be looked at too much. It was, it was the scares, right? That was sort of what they were there for, and the exploitation side of things as well, which Craven himself kind of contributed to. But there was definitely something else, especially with films like Nightmare on Elm Street, where there was just something a little bit extra in there, which perhaps wouldn't have become apparent on the first viewing. And it just made them a lot more interesting, a lot more diverse.
It's like, with the inception of any film, I think there's obviously always going to be ideas and something that are tangible and connect to something real. So I'm not saying that, even the most throwaway horror film doesn't have value in the same sense, but I just think filmmakers like him are important because they've sort of pioneered the genre in the sense that it encourages people to think about it in that way, to think about it as something worthy of academic discourse or deeper discussion. It's not, of course, it can just be entertainment, which horror certainly can be, and in the case of Wes Craven, absolutely can be.
Yeah.
But there's that side to his films, like the filmmakers we mentioned earlier, your Raimis, your Tobe Hoopers, who, they've created these experiences that can lend themselves to those kind of loftier discussions as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess we should start then by talking about some of his earlier works.
Yeah.
Did you want to start with Last House on the...
Yes. So the right.
Last House on the yes. Last House on the yes.
Yeah. So Last House on the yes. It's been I have seen it. It's been quite a while, but it was kind of the way it was funded was spurious, right, for a start. So it was firmly in that kind of exploitation realm, right?
Okay.
And it's by and large a pretty average kind of movie. Like it's definitely his humble beginnings for sure.
Okay.
It was a bit of a nightmare to make as well. There's a lot of, in a weird way, it's a really great way for him to start because, and a lot of people attest to this with Sam Raimi and The Evil Dead, and just how much of a nightmare it was to shoot because it's effectively just. Well, he must be. I think he was like 20, wasn't he, Sam Raimi? Just like running around with a camera with his mates, but then it was also semi-actually funded, and people were actually working on it as well. So it's a strange one. I'm not a huge it's kind of a cult film, Last House on the Left, but it doesn't for me. It's just an unpleasant watch. Like it's not. It's really uncomfortable viewing, and that might well be the point, but. Yeah, I'm not going to be rushing to see that one again. Really.
Okay.
But his next film, I think it's his next film, Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah, Hills Have Eyes was his follow-up, wasn't it?
Yeah, that has a lot more. Has a lot more to it, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you make that point about the uncomfortable nature of Last House on the Left, because I think that ties quite nice into the sort of like the horror films of that time in the sense that they all were uncomfortable to watch on the basis of how cheap they were. And I think that cheapness really lends itself to the experience of watching these horror films. And firstly, if you consider them historically as films that were a response to, a very conservative period of history.
Yeah.
Well, not everyone was obviously conservative, but the dominant ideals were certainly conservative. So exploitation cinema, horror cinema, these are like the most rebellious and extreme sort of attempts to remedy that, I guess.
Yeah.
Just as films separately to that, I mean, if you think about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, I know we're making a bit of a leap here, but so much of the reason why that film is so effective is because of that cheap aesthetic.
Yeah.
It ties in, and that's one of those, I guess, I don't know if it was like, I'm sure it was probably deliberate, but to me it feels like a bit of like a happy accident that it was like that. That the themes of the film, the ideas of the film, the narrative, all is just sort of like held together by the aesthetic of that movie. Like without that grainy camera and the way that cheap film stock responds to light and is dirty, like that film wouldn't be half as impactful as it ended up being.
That's true, actually, yeah, and maybe that's the same with Last House on the Left. I just need to revisit it. So I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre again quite recently, ahead of watching the second one, which we discussed last week. And yeah, you're right. It's just so textured and so like ingrained in a time, and the cheapness of it feels charming, and like you say, it feels genuine.
Yeah, it feels really. It almost sort of that texture further embeds the themes of the film, in a way that I mean, I don't want to say that all films that have like a sleekness and a visual style to them don't do that. Of course they can, but I don't know. Like in this instance, it's totally. I think it's essential to the film, and I think that applies as well to Hills Have Eyes. Hills Have Eyes feels to me like quite a nice partner piece to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
It is these films about groups of people going out into these untouched, sun-scarred parts of America.
Yeah.
And uncovering these hidden horrors. And what I love particularly about Hills Have Eyes is that, it's this sort of exploration of white middle-class America.
Oh, yeah.
You've got and how the family sort of fragments in this situation, and the hierarchies of the family sort of crumble.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think it's a really interesting way to take that apart. And it ties to what we were saying earlier about the nature of horror films being a response to this really conservative time, and obviously at the centre of that conservative ideology was the family.
Yes,
the sacred nature of family, spearheaded by the patriarch, the loving wife underneath, and the kids, the future.
So that
purity.
Kind of, that sort of 50s. That's probably coming from the 50s, right?
Yeah, like the baby boomer
family.
Sort of. The sort of shockwave of the sort of the boomer effect. I mean, sort of continually radiating through those generations, and I think. In that film, he really sort of, for lack of a better term, slashes it to ribbons, and he unearths the horrors within, as much as it is about, obviously the antagonists of the film are these disfigured
mutants, aren't they?
Yeah.
In result of inbreeding, am I right in thinking that?
So,
yeah.
So there's something to be said there, and something to explore there. But I think I found the most uncomfortable parts of that movie were with that family as opposed to the other family that that I guess, like, at least on a visual level, should draw more disgust.
It's funny that
No, I think that's a great film. I really, really like it. I like those, like I said, I mean, obviously you can guess by my almost constant enthusiasm in these episodes for Texas Chainsaw Massacre and my willingness to bring it up, but I love those early horror movies, and I love particularly those ones from filmmakers that, with the benefit of hindsight, are going to go off and like not only shape the genre but the medium as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was. I don't know why I hold Hills Have Eyes in a lot higher regard. I think maybe what it was is at the time I wasn't as accustomed to that sort of cheap style of filmmaking, and I might have discounted it as being a bit naff. Without kind of realising its cultural worth. Yeah, interesting.
It feels rebellious as well, doesn't it? Like when you watch them, you feel like a group of people are like going off on their own sort of nightmare.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're breaking away from all this stuff, and it's been funded by people. There's sort of this growing sense of discontent.
Yeah.
And they want someone to go out and make a movie that's really going to rattle the cage and piss their parents off.
Yeah.
I think there's that sort of spirit in the horror movie, which I don't know if that can be replicated. I mean, obviously I wasn't born in that era, so I don't want to sound like one of those people who goes, it won't get better, I'm not saying that, but I just think that as far as the horror genre goes, it's quite hard to shock people on a seismic enough level now. Yeah. In the way that they did back then.
No, yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's partially down to technological advancements and, the idea of the Earth getting smaller. We've all got smartphones, and it's difficult to write yourself out of that corner without being cliched. But back then, obviously, it was it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility that you just get lost in the middle of nowhere and have nowhere to go and no one to ring, and that was enough. Like that meant these stories could kind of blossom from that idea. But nowadays, it's just because. I mean, it's expensive to make a period piece, so you could make a film set in the 1970s where the same thing happens, but it's expensive. And so if you want to make a cheap horror film, you got to have some smartphones in there. Yeah. Which, I don't want to rag on that side of things.
There is still a lot of potential to shock people, absolutely, but I just think in the way that these films shocked the wider population, these films were getting banned. I mean, it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not keep mentioning it, but that was banned for a long time, and
in the UK certainly for a really long time. The video nasties, and that kind of thing, which is fascinating in itself.
That would be a great episode
I think
to discuss.
So. Just video nasties.
That just happened then. Organic. There you go. Yeah, well, let's do that.
We shall.
Maybe not next, but let's put that in the back catalogue.
Yeah, episode 46.
Episode 46. Yeah, that's what I really like about those movies, and particularly Craven's early efforts.
I know I've mentioned it already, but Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my favourite horror films ever. Yeah. I'd say it might even be in my top 5 personally.
Wow. Okay.
I have a bit of a story behind the reason why I wanted to watch this film. I was I think I must have been like 13 or something, and I was really getting into horror, but like I couldn't really blag watching more than a 15 on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. I think I was shown Alien a lot earlier, but my parents they were really nice about it, but they were quite selective about what kind of 18s I could watch. Like they had to have reverence for a film,
for the material, right? Okay.
So I
it's quite an interesting way to do it, actually.
I think it was great. I thought, like, they know that I'm gonna watch this kind of stuff anyway, a lot younger than I should, so why not introduce the ones they loved to me?
Yeah.
So you got like American Werewolf in London, you've got like Alien, obviously that's a big one. I watched both of those when I was like 11 or 12.
Wow, okay.
And then I was like 13, the next one, it was Christmas Eve, and my dad was like, I bought you Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to 6 DVD collection.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I was like, oh yes. And we were having a party, and some bloke told me the plot to the whole film because he was so smack. He drank a whole bottle of gin, and
ruined the film for you.
Well, he got it wrong massively, but he did recount what he considered to be the plot for A Nightmare on Elm Street to be. But he told me Freddy Krueger was electrocuted, not burnt alive. So immediately, maybe he was trying to throw me off. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I finally got to watch. I was really excited, and yeah, it just delivered on so many levels. Like there's that wonderful opening scene. I can't remember her name. It's not Heather Langenkamp. It's the blonde one who actually ends up getting killed quite early on. And she's having a nightmare, and it's intercut between Freddy Krueger making his glove.
Oh, yeah.
The hand.
I remember that, yeah.
And there's a bit at the beginning with like a sheep or like a lamb or something inside this horrible wet corridor. And the sound effects were so gloriously 1980s. It was just like... And everything was so kind of embedded and quite... like similar to Texas Chainsaw, like everything was all scratchy and horrible, and like, and the score as well was just all worked so amazingly, and it was dreamlike, and that is what I think the sequel certainly lacked, and what the first one did so brilliantly. The whole thing was a bit dreamlike, and which obviously lends itself to the themes of the film really heavily. Yeah, I absolutely love Nightmare on Elm Street, and Freddy Krueger in the first one is legitimately horrifying to look at.
Yeah, he is.
He's a bit of a character, like he kind of chases people around like a Warner Brothers villain, or like
that speaks to Craven's sensibilities in terms of like a wry sense of humour in his films.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
I think becomes obviously more fully formed in Scream, which we'll leave for later on.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's a real... one of the main parts of his movies, I think, is that sense of humour.
Yeah, there's a playfulness to it.
Yeah, that's probably a better way of saying it, yeah.
I think, the characters don't react to that playfulness as being playful, and that's crucial. They're terrified, you know.
Yeah.
They're not, in the sequel. I love the sequels as well, because they're
Three's great.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Dream Warriors is so good.
Fucking great.
Yeah.
I really like 3.
That's really inventive, that one. But they do lack that kind of genuine, like, horrific, nightmarish tone that the first one really encapsulates quite well. And yeah, it's really stuck with me that I watch it about once a year.
Yeah.
Same box set as well.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I love that. I mean, I think that's part of the reason I love horror movies so much, and certainly horror films like that. It's almost like you're going back in time with the film, in the sense, not just because you're watching a film that was made at that period, but you're also going back to how audiences would respond to those films at that time as well. So even we talk about this idea that horror filmmaking was certainly in its early days an act of rebellion.
Yeah.
Well, the consumption of horror films from the audience perspective was also considered an act of rebellion.
Oh, yeah. And
I think such a huge part of why I love it is because when I sit down to watch a horror film, obviously I'm 32 now, so there's nothing rebellious about sort of a 32-year-old with a growing waistline sat on his sofa eating like his third slice of ginger cake watching a horror film. But I think like when you sort of channel that feeling of being young and sitting on the sofa and you're sort of snuggling up to your parents, or you're watching on your own when they're out, or you're at a friend's house with parents that are more lenient than yours, or they just don't know, you know, and it feels like you're doing a subversive act, even though it's obviously at this stage in our lives not at all.
No,
but it channels that, and I think it's like a cross-generational shared experience when you're watching a horror film, particularly horror films from the 70s and 80s, that you are almost... It's almost like the same rituals that those kids of that time and those young adults of that time were taking part in.
Oh, definitely.
Albeit, obviously, the context is completely different for us, but I don't know, like, and it's obviously just our approximation of what that was. But that, in a way, it's why it's so special. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting point that you alluded to really nicely.
I don't remember anything specific, but I do remember thinking, like, a couple of times, definitely when I was like sat watching a horror film, I had like the remote in my hand, like ready to change that channel. If I had one noise, channel 1, BBC 10 o'clock, like evening news.
George Alagaya.
Yeah.
Calming face of George Alagaya. Yeah.
Babysitter comes in, like, I'm just watching the old evening news.
Yeah. FTSE 100's down. I think that's really, I love that, and that's part of that playfulness of horror movies, which is so central to Craven's brilliance. I think again that ties into why his films are so impactful in that nostalgic sense as well.
A lot of the central characters are teenagers, right? So that's kind of central to the slasher, especially the modern slasher. And it's funny to me that you'd make an 18 or an R-rated film with those characters so young. You're inviting people younger than that age group, which are legally allowed to see it, to come and watch it as well.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, and that again ties it back into that rebellion that you were talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think Craven uses sort of like, again, that sense of fun, the playfulness, the rebelliousness, the most incredible design. But there's also like a thematic intensity to Nightmare on Elm Street that I think in 3 they bring it back in.
Yeah.
But it's all about intergenerational trauma, isn't it?
Yeah,
like, you know, this white picket fence, conservative America. And there's this dark secret underneath. Obviously, the death of Freddy Krueger, this this tribal act of violence.
Yeah. The community has jointly basically committed an act of murder.
Yeah,
and they all feel that guilt, but they all have gone on. I mean, Nancy's mum is revealed to be an alcoholic. Towards the end, and so the cracks start to appear when this fella comes back, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. I didn't actually think about it in that way, but yeah, you're right.
Because it's, you know, this like you say, it's bubbling under the surface. You know, you got the fathers clad in starchy shirts coming back in from work, and, you know, and all of that sort of stuff, and it's framed as this sort of idealistic way of life, and that sort of is accentuated by Craven's use of the dreamlike camera movements and the way that everything feels a bit hazy.
Everything, I mean, literally hazy in it.
I mean, that is part of the nightmare. The reality is that for a lot of these people, they're trapped.
Yeah.
They're trapped in routines. They're trapped by the expectations of their peers and people around them.
Yeah.
Very much in a way that Douglas Sirk, many years earlier, would take down or critique, more rather, the American suburbia. I think Craven's doing it here, but just in a way that's, I guess, leaning more into the fantastical, not just to obviously service the horror narrative, but also to allow those themes, the intergenerational trauma, the disconnect between the young and the old, all these ideas. It just gives them that sort of sharpness, if you forgive the
slight pun.
Yes, the ever so slight pun. I love it too. I think as well the death sequences, man, so fucking inventive.
Really inventive. Yeah, that the first one with her kind of floating up towards the ceiling, and then and just dripping, like kind of smearing her like blood and intestines all over the wall. It's and then her boyfriend at the time is just Tina, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just shout Tina.
Yeah.
Oh my god, so unexpected, because you know she could have just got stabbed in the dream, woken up and gone just in bed, but like he makes her float and he makes her kind of go up. And then obviously my point is that
spoilers.
Spoilers.
I can't believe you spoiled the first time on Elm Street for me.
Like that guy at the party did. Well, he didn't. But anyway, Johnny Depp's death scene as well. That bit where he gets sucked
I always forget that he's in it. Yeah.
It's his first film.
First
ever movie. That bit where he gets sucked into the bed and then the geyser of blood comes out.
Yeah.
So cool.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. When we talk about this idea of sequels, obviously horror films are abound with them, aren't there? There are so many.
Yeah.
And this is, I think it links well to when we talk about Scream as well, because Craven plays with the idea of the sequel a lot in Scream.
Oh, yeah.
And even the more modern versions of the film, or modern versions of the ideas within the films, rather, still play with that idea.
Yeah.
For better and for worse, we'll discuss later. But I think the reason why horror sequels are never usually as good as the original is that because obviously the studio will tap into the success of the film.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, right, we want more of Freddy Krueger ripping people up.
Yep.
But not really any of the thematic stuff.
No. Then
so thematic stuff, which is sort of pioneered by people like Craven.
Yeah.
Is sort of pushed to the wayside by, I'm going to say it, this might sound a bit pompous, but less capable hands.
Yeah.
And they focus more on the sort of the visual stuff, the scare stuff, which also kind of hollows out the overall experience.
It's all about the kills, right? In the scene, it's just all about the kills, which we were talking about with kind of gleeful intensity just then. There was a reason why we enjoyed them so much, was because of that tone, right? Because of the undercurrent, which is absent in nearly all the sequels. I do love the third one, and I have...
Who directed the third one? Do we know?
Chuck Russell.
Was it Chuck Russell?
Yeah.
Fucking hell, Chuck Russell. Director of Eraser, also.
Yeah.
Which I think is an underrated Arnie film. If Lee was here, he would staunchly disagree with me on that, so I hope he listens.
Also, director of The Scorpion King, I believe.
Yeah, and The Mask.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Crazy.
Chuck Russell. I mean, I don't know what it is. He because it moves into a psychiatric ward, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I don't know if that's like more like the sort of location lending itself more to those themes in a more sort of visceral, blatant manner.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The film, it feels like a partial resurrection of the themes that Craven explored so well.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's also ridiculously good fun as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of great sort of set pieces in it.
Yeah.
And that horrible bit everyone remembers with the tendons acting as the puppet strings.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
That is good, right?
Yeah.
That goes back to the inventiveness of the kills and how he's playing with them. Right? Where I remember the second one being a bit bizarre. Like it's a bit where a bird explodes.
Yeah.
The sixth one's just weird.
Is it?
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen 6 yet,
Oh, mate, it's a treat. I tried to put it on for bad movie night at uni, and it wasn't bad enough. But
okay.
it is just an odd movie.
Yeah.
Directed by the editor of the previous 5.
There you go.
Weird. Rachel
New
Tyler.
Nightmare?
Yes, that ties in a little bit to Scream, actually.
Yeah.
I think what he was trying to do with New Nightmare, he succeeded to do with Scream.
It certainly lays out the blueprint for that sort of industry satire.
Yeah.
In a way that he would perfect with Scream.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's really interesting that he returns back to Nightmare on Elm Street and then weaving it into a narrative about the creation. I mean, meta narratives are his thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
He is all about that, as people that have seen Scream would obviously know. But I just think that's a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. It's bizarre. I didn't love New Nightmare. I thought it was a return to form by and large, the franchise. I thought the design of Freddy was a bit odd, and a bit like rubbery.
Okay.
But I do remember enjoying all the scenes where Wes Craven himself is in the film.
Oh yeah,
and he's like trying to explain stuff to Heather Langenkamp playing herself.
Yeah.
That was quite fun. And I remember when I watched Scream, it kind of made sense. And I was just like, okay, he's doing this now. This is sort of his thing. Is to be a bit more reflective.
And sort of satirical, but not in a way that's always sort of explicitly negative.
Yeah,
I think that's something that's really interesting to take note of. Did you know, actually? I should save this for the Scream part of the discussion, but Danny Boyle was offered a chance to direct Scream.
I very recently found that
out. Did you? Okay, yeah. Because I thought you probably would know that, but I just sort of would have,
because I think he'd done Shallow Grave by that point.
Okay, which, to be fair, it would have been quite an interesting thing for him.
He also got an offer to do the 4th Alien film as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
There we go.
I said to myself I wouldn't mention him for a few episodes after
but I've done it. I've done it for you,
mate. Yeah. No, all good.
Yeah. But I think a lot of them saw that as saw Scream as a super critical film, and I think what Craven does with New Nightmare, which he does better in Scream, is that he obviously has clear reverence for the conventions that he's satirising. Because satirising doesn't always mean mocking, extremely mocking something.
I mean, look at like Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
That's looking up.
Yeah,
it's looking up to those films. It's not looking down on them at all.
It's homage almost, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I like New Nightmare a lot. Weirdly, I watched New Nightmare before I rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, okay.
And all the other ones, so it was a bit strange to do it in that order. I quite enjoyed the film.
I love the idea that he's upset that he's got killed off.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm not having it. And then he comes into it's multi-layered, isn't it? So in the in the first 6, there's 2 layers to it, which is the dreamscape and then the real world. And then in New Nightmare, there's the dreamscape, the real world, and then the world that we were previously watching. Now also in a film. This is quite interesting.
Yeah.
What other Craven film, briefly, because a lot of his filmography isn't that remembered. There's like an Eddie Murphy vampire film I haven't heard of.
Yeah.
I quite like Red Eye, which is like a thriller.
Yeah, it's funny because I only know him for the big hits, really, and I know for some, for a film podcast about, in large part about Wes Craven. I perhaps should have ventured further, but we're busy, we've got jobs and stuff. We can't do it all, Yeah, I also only know him for the big hits, and I think that's why he's largely and should be remembered. I mean, every filmmaker's got misses, or the majority of filmmakers have got misses.
Yeah,
but I mean, someone like him, I think you can acknowledge his impact more than you should sort of be bogged down by an Eddie Murphy vampire film, which could be good. I don't know. I haven't seen it. So.
True, yeah. I'd recommend Red Eye. It falls apart in the third act.
It's mid-2000s?
Yeah, 2007.
Okay.
It's a thriller. It's not explicitly a horror film. It's a really cool idea. It's just about a woman who goes on a red-eye flight and meets a guy at an airport who starts chatting to her. And then when they get on the plane takes off. It's revealed that he's kidnapped her dad. And it's just really, there's a really great half an hour in it with them on the plane. It's really tension filled. There's like the stakes amp up.
John Cusack?
No.
I don't know why I thought that.
Cillian Murphy, actually.
There we go. I don't know why I thought John Cusack. I think I took one one quick look at a poster and thought, that's John Cusack, and just closed it. Okay.
Yeah, it's Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, that rings a bigger bell.
Weirdly, John Cusack would have suited that role, though.
Yeah.
He was in a lot of kind of mid-tier thrillers in the early to mid-2000s,
wasn't he? Yeah, he was.
Good film. As soon as they get off the plane, falls apart.
Did he write that as well, or was it just
I think he just directed it. I think he was a bit of a director for hire in some instances.
Yeah.
He made like a weird, like a light-hearted comedy amongst all this.
I guess it's that sort of thing with filmmakers that you can't. I guess some people like. We always use Linklater as the example that one for me, one for the studio sort of thing. And if you can make great films in both areas, then great. But some filmmakers just sort of bite the bullet, don't they? Make something for the studio, and then they can go off and realise what they actually want to do.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
I don't know if that's the case with Craven, but it's something worth noting, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Slasher films, then.
Yes.
Let's sort of zero it in a little bit before we get into Scream. It's a genre that I think has had a bit of a resurrection, with Scream and with Ty West's X and Pearl.
Interesting you mention those, actually. I want to make a point. I haven't actually seen them, but I want to make a point about them with regards to Scream 6. But yeah. But no, you're right. You got like other films like Don't Breathe as well.
Yeah.
Which is really good, really interesting. The Final Girls, that's pretty good. Pretty decent Netflix slasher.
Okay, yeah.
And it's similar in the sense that it's looking back on the tropes of and the characters in the film are sort of aware of those tropes. Does it a lot differently from Scream. I think that genre has definitely experienced a bit of a resurgence.
I think we're in the early stages of one. I mean, it remains to be said how good the quality of this resurgence will be overall. Because I think horror, unlike any other genre, is, well, maybe action. It's sort of the easiest thing to make a lot of shit in.
Yeah, definitely. Very cheap to make horror films.
Yeah.
You just need a couple of mates and a bucket of blood, and technically, and a camera as well. Might want to buy a camera. You can kind of make one.
Since Scream is a film that is, and I've like a couple of the films you mentioned, are so indebted to this idea of reflecting on the tropes of the genre, or the horror genre, or the slasher genre.
Yeah.
It seems kind of fitting to go through a couple of the key themes of slasher films, and then that will lead nicely into Scream, because it's very much a playing with those things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So obviously the antagonist, or the killer of slasher films, is usually played as someone that's sort of mentally or physically deranged. Yeah. Typically male.
Yeah.
Which is
almost exclusively, actually. Yeah.
What the interesting thing about it is that it's portrayed as often mute and unstoppable. Which is like the big convention, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there seems to be almost like a superhuman ability that they have to be able to resist the punishment that it deals out.
Yeah.
So
shoot them in the shoulder, like no worries.
Yeah. Stab them in the leg or something. That's fine.
Yep.
They're also very big, usually. Like I'm thinking like Jason.
Yeah, Jason. Even like Michael Myers is quite an imposing figure.
Yeah.
They're both mute as well, actually.
Yeah.
Freddy is the exception. He's a bit of a talker, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's a bit of a fucking chatterbox.
He is.
Certainly in the sequels. But
again, I think that's playfulness from Craven, isn't it?
There you go.
And of course, Ghostface is very chatty.
Yes, he is. Well, but you start on his voice.
Yes.
But yeah, by and large, it is a definitely like a trope of slashers for them to be this kind of
hulking, undefeatable, untrappable,
recognisable silhouette.
Yeah. Well, they are absolutely. That's great. I had not thought about that. The killer's background includes like a childhood incident, accident, trauma.
Okay, yeah.
Which again, Craven plays with quite a bit.
Ooh.
The weapons of choice, never projectile weaponry.
No, yeah, always handheld.
Handheld, so like knives, axes, claw hands.
Yeah.
And I guess that works in a sort of visceral sense. You know, there's this sort of like
there's a physicality to the violence.
Yeah,
isn't there? Which, if they had like a crossbow or a semi-automatic rifle, it wouldn't really be. Well, it wouldn't be a slasher, would it? That's in the name. That it's a slasher in the most literal sense, in that they have to use their digits to kind of enact this chaos.
Yeah. It's often seen as well in some sort of academic circles that the knife or the sort of the implement is phallic.
Okay,
which plays into the sort of gender roles and identities of horror movies.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, the idea of. I mean, one of the most. I mean, I can't pretend to know what this might be like, but the idea of a girl walks home alone at night, and there is something a little bit dominating about that, the male presence behind, and their ability to. It's pretty crude, but to sort of penetrate, right? Which adds to that sort of sense of unease and that real shock value that slashers have.
Agreed. Violent deaths. Obviously, that's central to slashers.
Yep. Inventive kills.
Yes, and that's what I mean. It lends itself, doesn't it? The use of the physical weapons, the lack of firearms.
Yeah,
a firearm is quick, isn't it? Typically, if you get shot in the upper body with something, you're probably going to die pretty quickly. You might bleed out, and that's not very nice. No, I imagine. I've never been shot, but like getting hacked up or chainsawed or stabbed with a pitchfork in the face or something like that. There's like an artistic element there which filmmakers can use to heighten the grotesque. Yeah, definitely. Which makes again, leaning back on that rebellious idea of the horror experience. If you want to terrify your fucking grandma and make in the 80s, this is the way you do it, right? Have someone get chainsawed in half, or their cock stabbed off with a pitchfork or something like that, Conversely, then, the protagonist is a single female survivor. Typically, they are the representation of innocence and purity. If you want to rattle the cage, you go for the kids, don't you? Yeah, pretty much. It adds exponentially to that sort of shock value, and weirdly would broaden the audience, because not only will teenagers want to watch it, parents might also kind of find that, if they're so inclined to be entertained by that shock value, then that'll only add to it, right? Yeah. That scare, the being frightened, every mother's nightmare, right? The idea of the child being taken away, and that's where a lot of those slashers kind of derive their scares from as well. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just in the grotesque nature of the violence; it's in the way who the violence is given to. Yeah. The girl as well, so in the context of slasher films, the girl is also someone that would stand out from their social group, is never usually the most popular or most attractive girl in the conventional sense. Again, I think that heightens the purity element. Definitely, yeah, because obviously bookish. It's quite often that the popular girl in the story is the one that gets hacked to bits early. Yeah, early doors. She's the one that's gone. Yeah, because they're just because they're less relatable and therefore more disposable, maybe. And then there's the friend group. Yes. So there's the girl who will be within a friend group, and this will be like almost like the staging post for the film in terms of like how the characters interact with the predicament that they're in, how they plan and move forward, but also, from a storytelling perspective, it allows the audience to identify and relate to at least one person in that group. Yeah, and then obviously that means if you can embed yourself in that narrative, then obviously the impact is gonna hit you harder. Yeah, when that character, if they're not the lead girl, will die. So, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah. Typically, always adolescent as well. Yes. I mean, the victims in horror films aren't necessarily, or slasher films, aren't always adolescents, but the core group tend to be young. Yeah. and they tend to be like there's the jock, the geek, and then the sort of very much the sort of the stereotypical archetypes that we're all more than familiar with. Even people, everyone knows those archetypes. So inherent to the way we.
Yeah, not just confined to slashers either. No, a lot of screwball comedies that have the same kind of group.
Yeah. I mean, our view as little old Englanders is, from across a lot of the way we perceive America is through that lens. Right?
Oh man, yeah.
We talk about this all the time about how culture helps informs your perception of things, but it's obvious. The jock, that is not an English term.
No way.
And yet we try and attribute that to situations in England or people that we know in school. And it really sort of has shaped our own framework. But I guess horror films alongside, like you say, comedies and stuff. But I think horror films are probably one of the major proponents of that, at least initially.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Visually, a lot of close-ups. You've got things like extreme close-ups, mids, tracking shots.
Yes, a lot of those.
Tracking shots, pans, eyeline matches, and reverse shots and zooms.
Okay.
Yeah. So
there's not that much. I guess the camera doesn't need to be that dynamic, right? It's got to be on ground level with these people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And finally, location. I mean, I'm sort of like just rattling through a few things. There's loads, but suburban, woods, isolated areas, or high schools and empty buildings.
Would you say middle class? Lower middle class, typically.
Yeah, I think so.
They're always doing all right for themselves, aren't they? All of them always have cars.
Yeah.
They all have cars and really nice big houses, and money is never really that much of an issue in these films, which is fine because got other things to worry about. But I always found that interesting that it never. In stark contrast to other like sort of action cinema, it never really explores the working class, I guess. No. At least with the big hitters, right? With the Nightmare on Elm Street and like 80s slashers are really concerned with that sort of American suburbia. White picket fence. Dad's got a good job. Police
nice
officer.
Big house. Yeah. Sleepy town with a respectful community. It's strange, isn't it, that they don't tend to go lower, particularly in that phase. But I guess it lends itself to the idea of attacking the what is considered the perfect representation of American ideology. Yeah,
definitely.
So the reason I sort of listed off a few of those sort of conventions is I think they're quite important to preface before we talk about Scream.
Okay, yeah.
And particularly the sort of slasher logic or the horror logic that sort of dictates a lot of those films, because that is central to Craven's sort of more satirical intentions.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this quite a lot and how he sort of does it. And I think the reason I think he's so successful is that he almost sort of like rationalizes the logic of these films.
Yeah.
In the sense that obviously we as audience members are conditioned by the experience of horror movies and the conventions of horror cinema. So many sort of classic criticisms of horror films are when you're watching them is I would never go in that. I'd never go in the basement. I'd never answer the phone. I'd just leave the house. I'd call the police.
Yeah.
All these sorts of things. But there's almost like a sense of realism in the way that Craven employs those decisions that these characters make.
Yeah.
In the sense that, obviously it doesn't make sense for her, if she's being chased by the killer, to run upstairs when she could leave the front door of the house.
Yeah.
But you go, but the door's locked,
Yeah.
And it makes sense within the conventions of the genre. We all say, I wouldn't do that. But that's never actually happened to you. The way you think about horror films is completely sculpted by your previous experiences with horror movies. So you know what to expect based on those conventions. And Craven's rationalization of these conventions almost gives them new life. And I think that's something that when we talk about his satirical element, which is totally there even within this, but I think it's not like he's not taking the piss.
No. He's being quite sincere. And he's expressing a love for a genre, not like a distaste for it, or I guess a sort of expression of tiredness for these tropes at all. Like, he genuinely loves employing them in films, and I agree with you that why shouldn't you just rationalise them and add a layer of logic that people can kind of appreciate?
Yeah, and it's like when you think about with Scream, it's the killer's frenzied state, or which is typically shown as sort of ineptitude, the way that they sort of they trip over, like stabbing the ground, you know. But the film does such a good job of explaining that. The characters that ultimately end up being the killers in the first Scream, for example, one of them is sort of excited by the idea of being a killer, and the other one's sort of like almost portrayed as a bit of a sheep who just sort of like unwillingly follows this one person to be a murderer.
That's right, yeah.
So it would only make sense in the context of the sort of world that Craven has created that they would be a bit useless.
Yeah,
they don't really know what they're doing. They're not trained. They're not like experts.
No.
I think so much of the way that like what draws people to like martial arts or fighting is built on the perception of watching movies. I mean, I fucking hate seeing fights, but when you've been on a night out and you see it, it's clumsy, it's stupid. Like, and a lot, 9 times out of 10, nothing really happens because people intervene and it's messy and there's no sort of guile or
resolution.
It's just you know, I think that speaks quite nicely to Craven's presentation of that in the context of the slasher film, because these guys don't really have a clue what they're doing. One's really up for it, the other one's sort of along for the ride. And you get that sense of it in the two different versions of Ghostface when the reveal eventually happens.
Oh yeah, people analyse it, don't they?
They
like to work out which one of them is doing the killing, and you can tell, which is quite clever as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing about. I think you're right when you said that he clearly has reverence for it. Of course, he's coming in to make a slasher film at a time when the slasher film was being sort of battered by sequels.
Yes.
Sequels that, as we explored earlier in our discussion regarding Nightmare on Elm Street, will focus more on the upfront visual stuff than they will the thematic stuff in the background.
Yeah.
So I think he's well aware of that, and he's using those conventions to address some semblance of criticism.
Yeah.
But I think by embedding them again in theme, which is in this case, the satire and homage and the wide, the film itself.
Yeah,
he gives them that sort of energy that I think that maybe perhaps they didn't have in the films before that, indeed films within the genre before that. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting point.
Yeah, he did a wonderful job with revitalizing the slasher genre and breathing new life into it. Should we go ahead and talk about the actual franchise now? Scream.
Yeah. I mean, I think because one obviously is, I guess, in many people's minds, the best one. When we talked about Wes Craven's New Nightmare in terms of that that sort of metatextual study of not only his own body of work or the genre that he works in, but also a study of the industry itself. And that becomes more apparent in the Scream films because there's after the incidents of the first film, Gail Winters, the reporter, played by Courtney Cox, she sells the story of
Stab,
right? And it becomes Stab, which becomes a film. So it's like a film within a film.
Brilliant.
And that might sound trite and shit now, but back then that was pretty fucking clever stuff.
Yeah, man, it was revolutionary. And just like I love the kind of the subtle way in Scream that he subverts tropes, because obviously there's an overt side to it, but there's also like more covert aspects of it, like the fact that Henry Winkler, the Fonz, right? The principal. So it's that's such a great subversion of people's expectations. It's just like you're seeing, the Fonz from Happy Days as like a stuffy school principal. It's genius. Also, the soundtrack. The guy who did the soundtrack was told to write the score for a Western.
Is this Scream 1?
Scream 1, yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. Bizarre. And if you there's a lot of actual songs in there, like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and stuff. But the score is weirdly like a Western. Bizarre. Anyway.
Interesting.
There you go.
Scream
Scream
then takes on this sort of study of the film industry, the relationship between culture and violence, the consumption of culture and violence, which is central to Scream 2.
Yes.
Which is fascinating to see a filmmaker wrestle with that, because I can imagine that argument was levelled at him quite a lot, as it was to many filmmakers of the time.
Yeah.
We mentioned the video nasty era earlier. I think that was sort of the primary motivation behind it, was that this film's going to pollute your children, or pollute indeed anyone who watches these films. They're going to watch this film and they're going to turn into an axe murderer almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting to see he address that full on. and also reveal it's the way in which that idea is so easily manipulated.
Yeah,
I quite like Scream 2. You were saying that you were unsure about it, but after a sort of lengthy evening debate with beloved Cinderboy Alfie, who isn't here to sort of state his case, but can you sort of give me sort of a rundown of what your issues were with the film and how you've almost sort of come around a little bit?
Yes, I need to watch it again because I really think I'm going to enjoy it a lot more. What happened was I watched the first Scream and I recognised the meta narrative. I thought it was really clever. I thought it was, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it so much that I, by default, based on my previous experience with horror sequels, thought the second one was probably not going to be as good.
Yeah.
And I had that in my mind.
I think that's a fair thing to think, really.
Yeah.
Given on the... I mean, to be fair, there's some standouts. There's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yeah. Although I imagine if I was the same age and watched that at the same age that I watched Scream 2, I probably would have thought it was shit as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think you're right. Yeah. I think, I'm glad I discovered that film. Well, not discovered, because Lee recommended it to me. But, I'm glad I watched those films with this mindset I have now.
Yeah,
to see
definitely.
the worth in those things more.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't see the worth in it. I thought it was another
Cash in.
more of the same, like The Exorcist 2 or even the second Nightmare on Elm Street. I was just like, my expectations were low, and by default they were met. But I really need to see it again because it actually sounds really interesting. And then, but Alfie, that conversation sticks in my mind. I always think to myself, fuck, I do need to watch Scream 2 again.
Yeah.
I think I watched Scream 3 quite soon after I watched Scream 2, and that cemented that idea that they were throwaway, needless sequels, right?
3 isn't great, is it?
No.
What was it about Scream 2 that sort of now, when you reflect on it, that makes you think this is worth having another go at? What is it about? Because I think that Craven is very smart in the sense that he knows that he's sort of made a joke about sequels. And part of his reason for the whole sort of structure of the original Scream is to sort of mock that, in the sense that, not mock it, but satirise it more, in the sense that these things typically don't really have the impact of the predecessor, or indeed will end up sort of bludgeoning the genre so much that it deprives it of the worth as any more than just a sort of gore fest.
Yeah.
What was it? What's inspired this sort of? Because I'm always just interested to know how people's opinions sort of like change, especially when met with expectation. I've quite a legitimate expectation on the basis of sequels.
I just think that, by and large, I've got a lot more comfortable with reading about films, and I've read a lot about Scream 2. I've read a lot of the sort of critical consensus. Obviously, I mentioned before the conversation with Alfie, and also now with you by extension. I want to revisit it, and also obviously, having seen the sixth one quite recently and kind of being reintroduced to the franchise, I'm like, I need to give it another go because I need to update the old Letterboxd with a more favourable review.
Yeah, fair enough. 3 not great.
Nope.
I don't even really remember 3 that much at all.
No, it was pretty bland.
Yeah.
I think the main criticism that was levelled on it was that it became what it was mocking. Yeah. And it became what it was, satirising, really. And it didn't offer much more than that. Yeah. I think Craven was coasting a little bit with that film. He wasn't with 4, though. I don't think he...
Did he direct 4?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
It was one of his last films.
Fucking hell, that's ridiculous that I've forgotten that.
Yeah,
I love 4. I really, really like 4. I still think it's probably my favourite Scream sequel.
Okay.
I quite like 5, and 6 obviously we'll go into, but I think what is so interesting about 4 is that before that, the teenagers or the young adults that are sort of subject to the murderous rampages of Ghostface are more sort of bystanders to horror logic. They rely explicitly on their knowledge of the media they have consumed to dictate how they move forward. Right, so obviously, and that serves, I keep saying the fucking word meta, which is probably going to piss some people off, and quite rightly, but, Craven's meta intention, but it also helps to sort of drive the film on narratively. Yeah. So the teenagers will get together, and there's always that one nerdy character who will go, "Well, I've watched all these horror films, and this is what's going to happen."
Yeah.
So in the sense now that they're just sort of more consumers, they're just consumers of this material.
Yeah.
But now in Scream 4, this film came out like when we're right on the cusp of this idea that everyone can be a creator.
Right.
Everyone can make anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can get their fucking like phone out, or in this case, I think it's like some bizarre webcam thing.
Yeah.
Which I fucking love because it's just like the beginnings of this technology, and it's always a bit shit, and it's cumbersome, and yet the film makes it work.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like when there are films that are made in this sort of moment where technology is going to boom, but the sort of early stage of it's crap. They tend to be quite dated.
Yeah.
But in the sense of Scream 4, it just adds so much more to the charm of it. It's this idea that victims are no longer, or indeed the antagonists, they can create their own narratives in a way that they're not just sort of like relying on or informed by the culture they've consumed.
Yeah.
They can actually go out and make.
So they're more active.
Yeah, right? they're creators now.
Yeah.
They're not just the consumers. They're the ones that can create their own stab films.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just think that's a really fascinating thing that Craven wrestles with, and I think he does it really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think that being on the cusp of that new technology, a technology which is such a huge part of the world we now live in, I think that allows Craven, I think that sort of almost gives him the shot that he needs to sort of go back to form. To sort of tackle these themes with the kind of grace and sense of humour and sort of sardonic nature that he did in the original Scream, and to a slightly lesser extent, but just in some way effective, Scream 2.
Yeah. That's interesting. That I know that when it got released, Scream 4 was a bit. It was got quite a mixed critical reception, but apparently, especially since like the Me Too movement, it's had a bit of a reevaluation.
Oh wow!
A lot of other people have also hold it in quite high regard now.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think it's still probably my favourite Scream film. I guess because we keep fucking self-referencing ourselves, but in other episodes. But ideas, films as cultural artifacts. I think that's a real big one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in the sense of that technology, because there's a character that goes around with a webcam, doesn't he? Like, and it's just so like fucking weird now. Like, it's still sort of kind of inaccessible, but I guess with the benefit of hindsight, that it's going to be so much more accessible, and so much easier just to sort of create your own content, and have your own impact on the world. In a way that's so much quicker than making a movie is.
Going
definitely through the studio system. I really like it. And then 5.
Not seen 5 personally.
Okay,
should have done, because it would have helped watching Scream 6, the beginning and the introduction of these characters, or rather the lack of introduction, confused the fucking hell out of me. But anyway, sorry, go on.
No, I quite enjoyed 5. I think the revival is very much in the spirit of Wes Craven. I think what I like about the sort of self-referential study of the horror genre is that the sort of lead actress, is it Jenny Ortega? Yeah, she has this exchange with Ghostface at the start in the classic Scream way over the phone, and she's talking about these sort of highbrow horror films. The presence of these horror films like The Babadook. And she sort of has a discussion with Ghostface about The Babadook. So it's almost like this horror snobbery, this sort of A24 horror thing, which we love, and I continue to love. But I found that element of it quite enjoyable. It's sort of like sort of mocks that horror snobbery,
right?
In the sense that slasher films tend to be these quite straight-laced, grim, spectacle movies,
very formulaic.
Yeah. Then you've got these filmmakers really sort of embedding themes and ideas into their films and having like long periods of silence and all that. And there's this sort of
motherhood as a theme. And all that kind of stuff,
I just think it's really interesting that is like one of the conflicts in the film. And it's quite subtle, and it's threaded through the film, and it bursts out every now and again. But I quite like that about it. But again, it does this thing where it's saying the same thing. It's has characters basically listing the convention of horrors and saying, well, this is a requel now.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that self-awareness, but it doesn't really offer anything new with that. I don't know if it's because I have a real soft spot for Scream films that it dampened my sort of critical eye a little bit.
Yeah.
But I remember coming away thinking, well, I mean, it certainly doesn't do anything really that new.
Yeah.
But the new cast are quite likeable, and it had some shocks in it. I mean, Dewey fucking dies in it. So, shit. Yeah, I should have probably not told you that. I don't know.
I got it from the sixth one.
Oh yeah, it is explained, isn't it?
Yeah. It's Courtney Cox is like looking all sad at one of his pictures and stuff. I was like, oh, I guess he's dead. Yeah. I briefly going back, I love that character, the Dewey, the kind of idea that obviously again it's a trope of slashers. That there's a very competent police officer on the case. In Nightmare on Elm Street, it's Nancy's dad. And, and this guy is just like a bit of a kind of
a bumbling sweetheart.
He's got good natured, but he's hiding behind his badge. I love how his sister just sees right through it in the first one. I think that's a really, really good character actually.
And it was actually quite impactful when they killed him off because they sort of address it in the film and say, the requel, that means that the sort of the old guard are no longer protected.
That carried across in the sixth one as well. The legacy characters are no longer safe.
Legacy characters, and they deliver that. And it ends again. I mean, all these films typically end in a way. There's the unmask and the reveal, and I was like, okay, whatever. It's sort of like, almost like a takedown of fandom.
Yes. Okay.
This idea that fandom has become one of the central driving forces or the application of fandom in mainstream cinema, which I would subscribe to quite a high degree. Yeah. And I quite liked that there were some filmmakers going, no, fuck this. Yeah. Let's take the piss out of these people.
Rightly so, because they deserve a bit of a, just getting taken down a peg.
It's just a sort of a bit of an aside, but I think they get far too much. They've been given far too much, and I think that these campaigns and these things that people do when things don't go their way, it's just a bit weird, I think.
I mean, again,
fucking accept it.
Continuing with this aside, there's a great. I'm paraphrasing someone else here, but like, the greatest Star Wars fan quite often isn't. Quite often hates Star Wars.
I know people just like that. They'll watch the originals and they'll have reverence for them, but anything new, they're like, nah, it's
just
crap.
Hate it. And you're like, but it's the same. It's Star Wars. You love Star Wars.
It's strange, isn't it?
Funny.
They don't know what they like. You don't know what you like.
But
no, I liked that about it, and I think that was something that, again, it's not particularly fresh in the way that they do that, but it was anchored enough in the current cinematic landscape to make it feel somewhat more fresh. So that's a sort of whistle stopped all through the Scream films. Should we just go straight into 6?
I think so,
because it all leads up to this.
It does.
First thoughts? Because I think you might be a bit more negative about it than I was.
I think
or am.
I'm mixed on it, right? I didn't hate it at all. I thought it was really enjoyable. I thought it was a nice, succinct length. I thought there were some really great moments in it. I'll go through these. I'll go through those now. So the opening scene with the teacher who's expecting a date. Great opening. Really great opening. I thought that was just a really lovely, really quite interesting, intriguing, fresh way to open the film. Weirdly wanted to follow her around for the rest of it. I don't know why. I was like, because I hadn't seen 5. I didn't even know there was going to be any characters in it. I was like, I'm kind of into this plot. I kind of wanted the bloke to turn up and for it to follow them around. So that was a really good opening scene. I really loved the scene on the train. I thought the tension was really palpable in that scene. Just in the way that they kind of employed lighting and being on a kind of crowded New York subway train. And I thought that was really good. I really liked. I mean, it was an indulgence of them to continue with it's kind of become a bit of a staple of the Scream franchise. But I did really like the conversation they had about the tropes and the updated and the idea of the franchise being the next thing that they had to kind of follow through. That was great. I thought those particular moments, I was like, that's kind of top tier Scream. But there was just, I've explained, I thought it was just a bit mutton dressed as lamb is what I said in my Letterboxd review. I just thought it was, the tropes themselves, as meta as they once were, are becoming tired in and amongst of themselves. Like they're not really adding anything new. It wasn't really that inventive by and large. Didn't care about any of the characters really. Okay. Apart from Courtney Cox's one, and then they didn't even have the balls to kill her off. I've never found Ghostface particularly scary, and I know that's not really the point. I never thought he was a particularly menacing presence. This goes back to even the first one. There's a really weird shot in the first one where he's kind of sneaking up to the house party, and it's like a slow zoom into the hedgerow, and he just like he's got his knife and he's just kind of like snooping around. I know you can't see me. I'm doing a little impression of him right now.
I can confirm he is doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never found it particularly scary, so that side of things, yeah. This is a really common criticism, but I was unwilling to suspend my disbelief that someone could get stabbed that amount of times and not just bleed out and like, you know. I don't know.
That's a Scream thing.
I
man.
know.
That's how Scream works.
It is. It just there was something about it this time that like, don't know, just didn't do it for me at the time.
What I agree with in terms of your criticisms in the sense that things are getting a bit stale, I think is right.
Yeah.
I think that the way that they attempt to sort of recalibrate the film's sort of meta texture. I keep saying meta. I think
no, that's right.
Meta-textual intentions to suit this world of franchises and endless sequels. You know, it definitely just ends up becoming the thing that Craven criticises or critiqued all those years ago.
Yeah.
And I know people level that criticism with him with 3, but I think it's far more present now.
Yeah, no, I think so.
In this film, and I think that just because you've got this sort of self-awareness, it's not a get out of jail free card.
No.
You know what I mean? You can't be like, well, this is this, so we've got to do this. It's like, well, yeah, but doesn't necessarily mean I don't respect the intention.
Yeah,
because because there is like an attempt to criticise the landscape of mainstream Hollywood, and I think that's what Scream is at its best really, really good at. But I think at this point, it's like, well, I would like to see some kind of change, some sort of commitment to doing something slightly different. If you're going to criticise this, then I don't know, there's only so many times you can go, oh, look at this. Yeah. We're going to do this now and get away with it. No. So I completely agree with that. I also agree with the sort of sequences that you chose in terms of particularly the train sequence. I really liked, and I also liked, the sequence in the corner shop. I don't know, what's the American equivalent of corner shop? I don't know what the word is.
Oh, like the 7-Eleven.
Yeah. And they run in, you think, oh, he's not coming in. And he comes in.
I
thought, fucking hell. And what I really liked about that is that moving to that more populated urban setting, it sort of breathes more life into the set pieces.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
And it sort of heightens a sense of tension that is otherwise lost in the, I guess, what you would consider the long familiar, sort of more domestic or isolated settings.
Fights in kitchens, right?
And I love that. Again, at its best, it's great.
Yeah.
And that heightened the tension for me in a way that I've not really felt particularly tense in a Scream film ever.
Yeah.
Because I think I was too old by the first one to be really impacted by it and the resulting sequels, when I'd sort of thought, okay, I know what's going on here. What I liked about this was that sort of hiding in plain sight sort of thing, or not even hiding in certain cases. It really gave it a sense of tension there. Yeah. Because now the killer's not afraid to come out into populated spaces and commit these acts of murder.
It's true, actually. Yeah.
And I found that quite impactful.
Also, he's got a shotgun.
Yeah, he should. Yeah.
So there we go. There's something new with that. I did like that scene as well. That was a scene I forgot about. Might be because it was in the trailer, but I did like that scene.
Yeah, I thought it was really great. I really more of that would have been cool for me. I'd have quite enjoyed it. I didn't. Again, the whistle stop tour. I mean, we've just done that now with our podcast, but the whistle stop tour and then going through the legacy and then having like a museum to Scream, I didn't really buy that. I thought that was a bit naff.
Yeah, I thought they could have done a lot more with the fact that it was an abandoned cinema. I thought they were going to say something about the fact that cinemas were not as kind of revered as they were in the past. They just squandered that opportunity.
Yeah. Considering it's a film franchise that has absolutely no qualms about being obvious and what it's trying to critique.
Yeah.
Particularly about sort of like quite pressing issues about the nature of the medium, the way we engage with it, the way that it's marketed to us, sold to us. And you felt, you're right, I didn't consider that. I did like the cast. I don't know why, particularly the two sisters. I think it might be just because Ortega is such a good actress that and her sister, I think her arc about sort of being Billy Loomis's daughter, I mean, it's fucking naff and contrived,
but I didn't mind that too.
It works in the context of Scream, and it felt like quite an interesting throwback.
Yeah.
And I I think she plays that quite well, this idea that there's this sort of residual psycho within her. It doesn't really have a lot of
those weird
psychological sort of realism to it, depending on what you believe, I guess, within that field. But
this is the bits where she kind of talks to her
Billy Loomis,
like reflection.
Yeah,
that was a bit funny.
Yeah, I just thought it was quite naff. It was almost like American soap.
Yeah,
which I sort of worked for me in a way. I don't know, but I really liked them. Everyone else I was a little less. The antagonists of the film were rubbish, but then they often are in Scream films because they tend to reveal themselves.
Yeah, it was a bit cheap.
Yeah, I think the best, obviously, Scream 1 does that the best with keeping them so close.
Yes.
Again, another sort of subversion of the slasher genre that it's within. It's not this exterior force. It's within your close circle, which I think the franchise even now has always done quite well. But the way that they reveal, I mean, the reveal for this one was such a tenuous link to Scream 5, and I just thought,
I didn't. To its credit, I didn't guess it would be the police.
Oh yeah,
the police officer.
Yeah.
What's that actor's name? He's quite a famous chap.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Anyway, I did think it was a bit odd that he was mourning his daughter's death, and then in the next scene he was fine. But I kind of dismissed that as the throwaway. Oh, that's just one of the classic.
Scream does that really well. Yeah. Like they sort of try and, I think this gets to these films' detriment a little bit because they really try and explore the psychological impact of this way of life.
Yeah.
But then they're sort of like high-fiving each other, and I guess you're sort of half expected to sort of tolerate it and accept it. But again, how much of a free pass do we give that self-awareness?
I don't know. Yeah, didn't think it was as clever as all that.
No.
It pretended to be clever, and this one had a bit of a. I just felt at the time that it was ultimately looking down on certain films and also ignoring others. Like, whereas you were saying that the fifth one had fifth one with the Babadook.
Yeah.
And a discussion about that. That sounds really fascinating. With this one, they didn't really touch on that. They could have talked about, I don't know, Don't Breathe, or I don't know, Eden Lake or something.
Yeah.
It's just something slightly different would have been refreshing, but they largely kept to criticising franchises as a broad idea, and they didn't hone down on anything. What else did I like about it? I did. Oh yeah. The ladder, the scene with the ladder, that was quite fun. Yeah. That was, again, a little bit of a nail-biting moment.
Yeah. It was grim as well. It was quite a grim Scream film, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Grimmer than the others.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 was definitely a step up, but 6 is definitely the most grim Scream film in terms of just the nature of the violence.
Yeah, I mean, although I said earlier about, people getting stabbed and then being fine, there's some ripping of like stomachs in it, which are really quite grotesque. There's a shot in it of New York. This was shot in Canada, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shot of it in New York, a kind of bird's eye view of the city. You see it a lot in a lot of films. And there's a big H&M logo.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember that bit?
Yeah, it's weird
really
that you say that, because I was like,
strange,
what the fuck's that doing there?
Yeah.
Is that a sponsor?
I don't know. A lot of Coors Light in this film as well.
Oh yeah.
Big sponsor of sort of weak American beer seems to find its way into a lot of Scream films.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I think that's the sort of sad reality of modern Hollywood now. I think it's just getting harder and harder to escape advertising, even with things like the cinema. Not only do you have to sit, I mean, this is a fucking aside, but not only do you have to sit in the fucking cinema for half an hour and watch shit adverts.
Yeah.
And it's always really fucking annoying when you're sat next to someone that laughs at them all as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know there's some fucking dickhead in advertising who's making far too much money to dream up this shit. He's going to be thinking, brilliant, I've done it.
There we go.
So I've got to sit through that for fucking half an hour, and now in my fucking films I'm getting advertised to.
Yeah.
I know it's the nature of the beast. I know that, like from a creative perspective, sometimes you've just got to fucking clamber atop of a fucking big cock of advertising to get a bit more money to realise the better parts of a movie.
Yeah.
I accept that, and I don't look down on the filmmakers particularly.
No.
Because I think that's a ridiculous attitude to have.
No.
I think you can only sort of, there are very few people who can sort of say, they have this purity and say, I stayed away from it, and we can say that now because we're not successful filmmakers.
We stayed away from advertising things in our non-existent movies.
Yeah. My version of Scream wouldn't have a H&M advert in it.
Absolutely
but
not.
it will forever remain unmade. But I just think it's, I don't know, a fact of the modern world that advertising is slowly encroaching more and more on any creative practice.
Strange.
Or the output of a creative practice.
And
that sucks.
It does suck. Yeah, it was so weird to see it sort of so at the forefront. I was like, H&M? I remember seeing that in like the shopping centre when I was like 10. Like, what is this doing in Scream 6?
I'm just thinking about fucking naff vest tops now for the first 10 minutes of the movie. Again, I have a real soft spot for the films, and I think that might have guided me away from my criticisms really manifesting into something deeper to the point that I stopped enjoying it.
Yeah.
What I didn't like, it spent more time with the characters.
Oh, yeah.
And it spent more time with the relationships of the characters.
Yeah.
And again, that felt to me like bad TV drama writing at points.
Yeah.
And again, I know it's like, meta, but it's like, I don't know, like that's the original Scream films. They felt quite heightened and silly, but they never sort of retreated into full-blown saccharine romance.
Will they, won't they?
Yeah. That's just not.
Me.
I'm not about that. I don't think that really complements the film. It makes the new blood more annoying.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not what you want, particularly when you not prepared to pay Neve Campbell as much money. You've killed off Dewey Cox and you've mortally wounded
Gail Weathers. I kind of thought they were going to do good on their promise of killing off all the legacy characters. I was kind of very ready for her to die. Yeah. And when they didn't, when it was revealed right at the very end, they were like, actually, a lot of these people aren't dead. Right. Oh, okay. Fine.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely didn't hate it at all. I was unfair a little bit. Maybe I was just in a shit mood or something, but I think it maybe is a bit more of a 3-starer for me now. Okay. Ultimately, would see it again if someone else wanted to watch it. For example, I wouldn't chuck it on myself on my own. But yeah, there you go.
It's interesting. I think as the Scream films get old, as the Scream films go on, if you watch them in sequence, that feeling of taking part in a subversive act slowly goes away.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something to do with the fact of franchises just sort of cashing in. I don't know, and I think that's where Craven's criticisms loom in the background of this film and grow in intensity throughout.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why the film just doesn't have as much impact, in the sense that it does just sort of feel like a resurrection of a lot of the ideas, and the way they bring them into the sort of contemporary, into the zeitgeist, works to varying degrees. But yeah, I just think that's an interesting point. That the act of watching horror films as subversion is, I just don't see it as being as a prevalent a motivator as it was. And again, I'm talking with reverence for a period of history I wasn't even born in, but I don't know. I just think that's an interesting point to sort of tack on towards the end.
Definitely. I wouldn't know where to start now with, like, if I was like 14 and I wanted to, or maybe even younger, like 12, and I wanted to watch a horror movie, there wouldn't be as much sneaking around. I could just chuck it on the iPad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a factor that I remember when I had to like source the video from a mate.
Yeah.
You know?
The digitisation of media, man, it's made things so much more fucking convenient, and I'm not saying that I'm not privy to that. I absolutely am. I just think that physical nature, it makes it more of an event in so many different ways, depending on the film you're watching, the genre of the film.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this could quickly get really fucking nerdy, and a nerdy attempt to justify my extortionate Blu-ray collection that I still insist on maintaining.
Oh, lovely.
But I think you're right. I think the digital age is harder. I mean, because in a way it shouldn't be, because it's like easier. So the access is easier, so more people should be able to just engage with these things.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't know if this is maybe like nostalgia playing a part.
Maybe.
As we talk about again a lot. But yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. I think that's an interesting point.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Questing the cinematic void.
Scream 6 then. Good.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Relatively good stuff.
Relatively good stuff, yes. Good fun talking about that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think you probably get it from the sense from the tone of our voices that it's just something we really want to talk about for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love horror films, love slasher films, and love Wes Craven.
Yeah.
However, as always, we must move away in our outro. We can't linger. We mustn't linger.
No.
And we must always look ahead.
Yes.
Ever forwards. We're going to be doing John Wick Chapter 4.
Yes.
A franchise that is bizarrely, hugely popular.
Yes.
And I don't mean bizarrely necessarily in a negative sense. I just think it's really strange that this franchise is still going.
Yeah.
And the latest offering of which is 2 hours and 49 minutes long.
That's insane.
That is, for an action film
I know.
like John Wick, that is insane.
Because they take pride in being fast-paced. Like,
Yeah.
So how they've managed to have that runtime, I really hope they've done a good job, and that's warranted, because fuck me. I
sort of started to get the sense with the third one that it's getting a bit self-indulgent. I don't know. It had a great start, that franchise, so it'd be interesting to see how they sort of continue that in a very, very long movie.
Well,
also, that would mean, as it's out next Friday, that there might be a little bit of a longer break.
Yeah.
I know right at the start, when we sort of bought So the Boys to Men back into your ear holes, we said that it would be once every 2 weeks. And really, we're already performing better than our initial predictions.
Yeah, for 10 whole episodes.
10 whole episodes. It really, it's really nice. Feels like actually quite a nice achievement.
Yeah, man.
I don't really have a lot to be I've not achieved much. So this is big for me. But so that might mean there'll be a longer break than usual, which will work because we've both got stuff on.
Yeah, man.
And we might need a bit more time to focus on that. But rest assured,
we will be back.
When we're back, we will be back, all guns blazing.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So in
the meantime, enjoy this episode. Enjoy any one of our 10 other episodes, because there's a pilot episode on there as well. So technically, this is 11 episodes.
This is 11, yeah.
Enjoy any of those. Listen back to those if you want. And we'll be back very soon. It'll go quick.
Yeah,
don't worry.
Yeah. Don't you worry.
Don't worry. You'll have,
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.